Right, good afternoon everyone. As you can see from there, my name is Graham Clancy, and I've been asked to give a presentation on my own self-build experience. Rather than just show you the house that we're living in it now, I thought I would show you some of my background as well, because some of the points and recommendations that I hope to make this afternoon are actually born out of my previous experience. So this will serve as a bit of an agenda for the 15 or 20 minutes we have at the moment. I've been in Malaysia for over 20 years, where I own an architectural company, and we've done a lot of projects over there. I'm going to show you some of them, not because I want to just show you those projects, but because some of the disciplines that we use on some of the larger commercial projects are quite relevant if you're building your own home. And I think it's worth pointing those out. There are no differences between the process of originating the design and finishing it, whether you're doing a shopping centre or whether you're doing your own home. So I just wanted to show you that and some of the things that I've learned, pitfalls that you may come across. As it said there, I returned to the UK in 2013, thought I'd retired, got a bit bored, and decided to build my own house in our garden at home. You can probably tell from my accent, I'm from Manchester area, so we live just south of Manchester in Alderley Edge. I also built an oak frame extension to the family home. First time I've done that, frankly. I had some experiences from that. I thought I'd share those with you this afternoon, because that's an alternative, honestly, to the Scandia house type timber frame. I'll show you the house that we just moved into a few weeks ago. Not completely finished, obviously. So much water around, the landscaping is not finished, but I'll show you that, and then perhaps we can summarise by, I'll just share with you some of the highlights that I've had and some of the learning curve as well. So this is a house in Malaysia, West Coast, Penang. I bought some land over there and I built 5 houses like this on a cliff overlooking the sea. This is one of them, and the reason I've shown you this, it's an illustration as you can see, is because that's a 3D illustration, and I want to show you that the real house should be the same as the design that you originate on day one. And if it isn't, it's going to bring cost and frustration into your process. And I only use this in the odd presentation to show you that it can be done. So that's quite a big house, as you can see. That's 8,000 square foot. At the front here, master bedroom, living room, car porch to keep the cars out of the 30-degree sun. 4 bedrooms at the back, open plan living dining room, and there's a swimming pool at the back as well, which I'll show you some details. That's another elevation. Whenever I did projects over there, honestly, because 3D rendering is much cheaper in Malaysia than it is over here, it's quite good to be able to get drawings done from all the different angles and perspectives. It's not so simple over here, honestly, but if you look at the plans, the 2D plans, the floor plans in detail, actually there's no difference. So those are some of the original illustrations. This is the real house, just as it was finishing construction. That's land on the other side there, which hadn't yet built on. So as you can see, it's more or less identical to the original illustration, and that is how it should be if you follow the proper design process. No wood in there at all, because cement is a nationalised industry in Malaysia, but there's some decking here, which is a compressed wood. Just about survives in that sort of temperature, but apart from that, it's all cement and aluminium. There's a swimming pool around the back, cantilevered out over the edge of the cliff, and wherever possible, I like to use natural materials. Not so easy in some countries, but they call this 6-9 stone, and it's roughly broken up from the big boulders which you find in the foundations over there. You can break them up and make walls out of them, and the proportion is roughly 6 by 9, and that's where it gets its name from. This is a condominium on the beach, again in Penang, a short 2 or 3 kilometres away from those houses. 119 units in here, concrete. I said it's a nationalised industry over there. All these floors cantilevered off the lift shaft, which runs up the centre there. That's the swimming pool on the outside, The original specification had decking, didn't survive. They have a wood like mahogany over in Asia called merbau, but because it matures and grows much more quickly than wood does over here or in the colder climates, it doesn't last very long. So we had to dig that up again, quite honestly, and put tiles down, and that's what you can see there. This is the inside of my apartment there, and the reason I wanted to show you this was, you know, the slabs that are holding the floors up, they're 800 millimetres thick, and they're full of rebar, reinforced bar, and you can't drill into them. Obviously they're structural, and therefore changes later on in the process, in the design process, in that type of structure are virtually impossible. It causes a lot of problems. Over here, I tend to find that people say, well, I'd like to move that door over there. And any builder will say, I can do that, get his saw out, start to drill in the wall there. But really, if you get it right at the beginning, you should be able to get it right first time. And people often ask me whether construction over here or timber frame construction is the same price as a more traditional. It is, unless you start to make lots of mistakes. It'll cost you in money and it'll cost you in time, and that's where the additional burden tends to come in. When you've got a bigger project like this, you've got no choice, because you can't change the structure. You have to get it right at the beginning. And again, inside here, you can't drill into the slabs, so all of this area here where you see the aircon unit, that's a suspended ceiling. So to have an aircon unit here, you need 600 millimetres above it for the compressor. So all of the electronics, the electrics and the water feeds tend to be in this 600 mil ducting. But the main power coming into each apartment has to come through the slab, and that has to be built in on the day one when it's cast. It's quite difficult to change later on. This is the balcony, and the reason I've shown you this is, and what I liked about the house we've just done, I fitted all our blinds and the curtain rails. I just screwed them in. I was not surprised above a window like that. You know, in a traditional build you can find a cavity tray or a catnick lintel or something, and you're drilling away like this and it's skidding all over. But I just bought the blinds online, screwed straight in with drywall, the black screws. Very, very easy. And I know it's a small point. I quite like that actually, because none of the plaster cracked, went in first time right. Whereas over here, when we put these blinds here, very, very difficult. I know people have got SDS drills these days, but quite difficult to get a row. That's a 10-metre wide balcony. Very difficult to get a row of blinds like that level. So having a timber frame has some simple benefits when you move in. And whenever I design something, I tend to design it from the inside out. And I think that's important, because everybody talks about architecture, but the reality is we've all got to live in these things that we're building. So we should start from the inside. The more detail you can get in on day one, the better, even down to, you know, the kitchen units, the sizes, the arrangement, where you want blinds, where you want curtains, where you want your downlighters like this. Get them all planned in on day one. It is more flexible having a timber frame than that type of construction, but the discipline should still be the same, and that will be an easier, simple build for you, and therefore likely to be lower cost. This is a shopping centre, again in Penang, it's called Gurney Paragon. That's 1 million square foot of shopping centre with the client's office 20 stories high on top, to 35-storey apartment blocks in front. So that's quite a big project by anybody's standards. That's one of the original illustrations done in Singapore. That's the real product, finished, taken at night obviously, as you can see. And the reason I wanted to show you that is because obviously that's a big job in quite a tight, these are other apartments on this side, and there are apartments here as well. You know, being able to manoeuvre the amount of materials you need to build something like that is very difficult. And this is the inside. This is what the client calls a premium floor. It's the ground floor. So this is marble brought in from France. You can't have that sitting around on site for weeks on end, because To build something like that, you need a tower crane in 3 of the 4 corners. You can't manoeuvre any of the equipment on site, so you can't afford to have 20 or 40-foot containers sitting there not being used. And on the 7 floors above here, there's roughly 800,000 square foot of tiling, which came from Nairo in China. Had to buy it 6 months in advance. Again, you have to plan that because we did the interior as the floors were built. You have to plan those to arrive when you want them. And I also think that's important for timber frame planning as well. Unless you're lucky to have a field next to your plot, if you're a bit tight on space, you need to make sure the materials are specified as early as possible and they're called off. And I know Scandia House sometimes discuss amongst themselves how much they should offer, but I quite like the one-stop shop. So I bought my doors and windows, loft ladder, from them. Paid a bit of a premium for them, I think, my main contractor tells me, but they were specs on day one. I could call them off. When I phoned up, they arrived when I wanted them. And I think that's quite good. And it's in line with what you'd have to do on something like this. I also think if you're in a more built-up area, where my house is in Manchester's Greenbelt, so we are lucky to have a field next door, but if you're in a more built-up area, you don't want to annoy your neighbours, obviously. You don't want to have more than necessary heavy equipment coming and going. So again, if you've got a timber frame, the guy that's assembled ours, they said 2 weeks, it was up in 7 days. And it was sealed. And that made the internal trades easier to manage. So I know most of them, but you know, they're all doing 3 or 4 jobs at the same time. The fact you've got a clean environment on day one means you can balance when you get the plumbers, electricians and tilers and what have you to come into your place. So yeah, when I came home, I thought I'll build an oak frame extension. That's it. That's an oak frame extension on the family home, which I've sold now actually. First time I've done that, honestly. I got the green oak from France. Those are quite chunky. Those are 200 millimetres, so 8 inches square beams. Really heavy, much more heavy than I thought they were going to be. But the reason I'm showing you this is not really the oak frame, which has turned out okay, but it's been quite a struggle and quite a cost to get to that situation because of the engineering that was required. There are bigger beams in there, bigger I-beams in there holding that up than there are in that shopping centre I've just shown you. And I argued with the engineers for quite some time, but they give a 2 or 3 fold cover on the critical calculations. So the original house, which is 60 years old, has a 16-inch 400 millimetre wooden beam. The ridge hasn't sunk, it's been there 60 years. In that extension, I now have to have a 600 millimetre 2-foot I-beam, which had to be craned in, rectile garden, and then had to have I-beams down the sides of the gable as well to hold up that I-beam. And then we had to have a coin stone put in, the original brickwork on the original gable, so that the I-beam wouldn't crush the rest of the brick, so I had to have a cast beam put in there. And I think, just a personal opinion obviously, but I think that's added cost for us. And from my point of view, it hasn't quite given us what I wanted. This is fine, this is the lounge downstairs. It's big, 6 metres square. It's turned out okay. I didn't put frames within frames because I tend to think that they age at a different rate. And that's something I want to show you later on the Scandia House product that I've done. So on this, none of these windows open. Got double doors here, obviously, and the room is big enough not to overheat in the summer. The mass of air is quite good, obviously. So that's turned out okay. Where I'm a bit disappointed is the bedroom upstairs. So the original design had that size of timber beam in across there. And to be honest, that's what I think is necessary to hold up the end of the gable. But hidden inside that are the 2 I-beams that are only there to hold up the I-beam that's coming across there. So it's a small point, I know, but that's not what I wanted. I wanted a sharp edge in the roof here, had to have a big flat. It's almost 30 inches, as you can see here. Big flat of board over there to cover up the I-beam, no other reason. And I've had to box this in, had to get other oak in, planed up into 25mm planks to cover the I-beam, so those are more chunky than I would have liked. It's fine, I know, most people wouldn't notice. When there are plantation blinds or curtains there, it'll be fine, but it's not what I wanted. So I had already designed a house to go in our garden to keep myself busy in this style, and I changed my mind at the last minute, and I met some of these guys at the Grand Designs exhibition in the Excel Centre. My memory of timber frame is really from the 60s, honestly, in some of the new towns, and I remember people, I was told, people couldn't get mortgages sometimes, and I thought, what's this timber frame? And having been overseas, dealing in concrete for 30 years, I was really out of touch. So I'm in the same boat as all of you. I'm doing it, or I have done it for the first time. I changed over to timber frame at the last minute. I had planning permission for a house of this shape. I changed over to timber frame because of the frustrations I had. That extension cost, I re-roofed actually, so the tiles were all the same, but with the new roof that cost £140,000, and I think that's too much per square foot. That whole house there, yeah, it's about 350 for that, including the hardscape on the outside. And that's the other thing I would say, whoever's doing the drawings for you, make sure you get all your landscape sorted out in the same detail that you have for the inside, because this is Indian stone around here. There's quite a lot of that. If you have a main contractor doing the building work, they will love it at the end of the main contract, and they will go on to a day rate, £110 to £130 a day, and they will love it, and you'll have less control over your budget than you had on the main contract. So make sure when you have the drawings done, whoever does those, you get all the lights in, all the electrical points, all the hardscape on the outside. Hardscape is VAT free if it's on the original plan. The lawn will also be VAT free if that's part of the planning process. Yeah, if it's on day one, it'll be lower cost for you.